Have you guys ever watched a trailer for a new game that you're really excited about and just kind of thought, okay, I'm not sure how I feel after that. It wasn't very good looking, but there's some gameplay mechanics I like. I don't even know what to think right now. That's how Legendsza left me feeling, and a lot of other fans feeling. Now, a lot of that reason is because it looks exactly like the two games that released before it, Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, 3 and 2 years ago respectively. Those games were not blowing anyone away at the time when they released. They were pretty lackluster, even when you compare them to something like Breath of the Wild, which even though it doesn't have the most beautiful graphics, it still has a lot of beautiful elements to it. The effects are beautiful, the scenery, the vistas are beautiful, the lighting. When it came to those games, there wasn't really much to look forward to in terms of graphics. I mean, you have the night skies in Arceus, which I will defend, those are beautiful. But besides that, it just kind of looks like a GameCube game, sort of. And that has people confused about why Pokemon seems to be stuck in this era of just blocky, bad frame rates, silly looking graphics. Why can't Pokemon meet the expectations of fans nowadays? Now, there's something called the Pokemon nostalgia effect. That's not some scientific term, that's my own scientific term. I'm a sucker for Pokemon. I fall into this category myself. A lot of people are in that. That nostalgia factor, that Pokemon nostalgia effect, is what really keeps this franchise alive and keeps it in good favor, poor release after poor release. And to be real, recent Pokemon games outside of Arceus haven't felt all that magical. They haven't felt like those early games to me. And yet the franchise gets a much longer leash than most. I mean, think about it. When you look at some other series like Dragon Age, Battlefield, Assassin's Creed, these series lost favor after just one or maybe a couple of questionable titles. Meanwhile, Pokemon's questionable streak keeps going with questionable title after questionable title. People are more willing to give Pokemon that leash because they have that nostalgia effect. Because maybe they played it on a Game Boy when they were a kid. Maybe they played Pokemon Stadium on the N64. It has the acumen, it has the foundation to be able to withstand these for a longer period of time. But it seems that effect is finally wearing off now. Now hold the horses here. I am actually a Scarlet and Violet defender. I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna say it. Outing myself here, but I have to admit, I would call myself a mini defender. I won't defend the frame rate or the graphics. I will defend the gameplay and the story. It was kind of interesting. It got dark. The whole robot guy's actually dead. It's a bit of a spoiler there. Was cool. And was it on Arceus' level? It wasn't, no. In terms of gameplay and story, I would argue it was, but it was fun and I'll stand by that. It's still a real problem how the graphics looked and frame rate was a flop. Now, why did this reveal really feel off? When I first saw that reveal, like I was saying, I felt disappointment and I wasn't alone. I wanted to know if I felt the same way, so I watched some other creators react. And even the most die-hard Pokemon fans had these little micro-expressions, like they were trying to stay excited, but couldn't hide that slight letdown. Sure, the excitement picked up again once they saw those cool battle mechanics where you can kind of roll out of the way of attacks, and once you saw the starters, which some fan favorites in there, that was a safe bet for the Pokemon Company, Game Freak to do. But that initial gut reaction, that was disappointment in a lot of people. I think some people are being dishonest when they won't admit that they felt disappointment when they saw Scarlet and Violet 2.0. Now the graphics debate. Now really, do graphics even matter? That's the question. Does Pokemon even need good graphics? Well, it's never really had them, so why should it start now? Well, I think it's because the formula is getting stale. And when gameplay doesn't evolve enough, what's the next thing that fans are going to start noticing? Well, it's going to be graphics. And suddenly Pokemon's visuals are under that microscope because that gameplay, whether it's in Scarlet and Violet, Arceus is a little unique, is still very similar to Pokemon Yellow back in the day, 30 years ago now. And maybe some fans, including myself, don't want to admit that the Pokemon formula is stale. That's a totally reasonable psychological thing to do. I love turn-based combat. But even in other games like the upcoming Clair Obscure Expedition 33 and Metaphor ReFantazio, even Paper Mario, it feels more unique and engaging. Luckily, it looks like ZA is making some changes. But will it be enough? That's the question that we're all wondering and that is in the back of our heads. What is it about this identity though that feels off? So I grew up playing Pokemon Yellow, Red, and Blue. Like many of you, I'm sure. So I get this whole debate. I remember seeing Sword and Shield for the first time and thinking, this looks worse than Wind Waker, a game from 2002. And it's not just about fidelity. I still love playing N64 games. In fact, I'm playing Mario 64 right now and I'm perfectly happy with the graphics. It's not a problem for me. That's not something I focus on. It's the lack of style and just the washed out color palette almost. It's the little touches that make modern Pokemon feel uninspired. Take Pokemon Colosseum, a GameCube game. It was more linear and less ambitious than these modern titles, but it had style. It felt realized. And yet today's open world Pokemon games feel empty. When a game like Pokemon Colosseum, which is linear and is very tight and condensed, has more passion and soul behind it than a game 20 years later, it kind of makes you start to question why? What is missing here? Why is the soul missing? And that's sort of an intangible aspect that I feel when I play some of these new games like Sword and Shield. Like Scarlet and Violet, there's some intangible component missing, and part of that lies in the empty textures of the graphics, or the lack of passion in those graphics. Part of that is the problem. I think a lot of us out there have a sort of Breath of the Wild dream too. I think a lot of people want Pokemon's Breath of the Wild. Some even want a Pokemon Pal World. And visually, Pal World is 10 times better looking than any of these recent Pokemon games. Again though, here's the thing, it doesn't matter. Pokemon is such a strong, unique premise that people will still buy these games no matter what. That was proven by Scarlet and Violet's sales. A game that was hit with terrible reception. Any other franchise basically would be a do not buy. But people still bought it, it set records. That's just how it is with the Pokemon company, Game Freak's Pokemon games. There's another phenomenon that a lot of us experience too, and it's that aging out of Pokemon. And I think that's why Arceus and even Scarlet and Violet felt exciting to me. They were trying something different, but then you start playing and little things remind you that these games are still designed for kids at their heart. Even though those stories are much more impactful and dark, there are things like in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Why does your rival still pick the Pokemon that's weak against yours? Where's the challenge? It's things like this that slowly make longtime fans feel like maybe these games aren't for them anymore. And so, is it too late? All of these factors considered, is it too late for Pokemon? Are people just aging out of it? Why do we care about graphics suddenly? These are my answers. At the end of the day, I am hopeful for Legends ZA. I just don't know if it's the game that will finally shake up the franchise in the way that fans want, whether they know it or not. But maybe that's okay. Maybe Pokemon doesn't need to change. Or maybe we're just waiting for that one game that finally does, and every new release that comes out has that expectation upon its shoulders. Do you think Legends ZA is going to meet those expectations? And can it ever really? Have we reached a point where Pokemon, the franchise, whether it's because the demographics are aging or because our expectations for graphics are raising, can it really ever meet those expectations in its current state? We know they've taken a longer time in development to figure this out, so there's hope there, but do we think Pokemon can meet these expectations? If you ask me, I actually think it can. I know that a lot of people were skeptical about Arceus at the start as well. And look what that did. That is many people's favorite Pokemon games, including those people in their 30s and 40s who started out playing Pokemon in the 90s on the Game Boy Advance or Game Boy Color games. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I'm hoping good things are coming for Legends ZA. See you next time.